And everybody, please be warned. This is a spooky thing I'm about to say. Very, very unsettling. Please move all your small dogs and cats and babies into the other room for this part, because this is going to be very scary. Picture, if you will, picture with me a scene depicted on an ancient Corinthian tablet. So this is something that was described in an academic book called Mythologies. I'll put the name below in the show notes or whatever you call them. But this was a description of something that was inscribed on a tablet, a scene. A potter sits down at his wheel and prays to the goddess Athena to guide his hands as he does his craft. As the wheel begins to spin, a darkness comes over the room and a feeling of tension sets in. The man looks up from his work and is stunned by the visage of a hideous dwarf gazing at him with an evil eye. Hideous dwarf. A malicious dwarf, I would even say. And just picture that, it's gazing at you, you're trying to do your work, and it's just mischievously there with malintent. The feeling of malicious energy focusing on this potter causes his hand to tremble for a brief moment, putting his pottery in jeopardy. He looks down briefly, but then, all of a sudden, his hand, just in time, compensates and corrects in that moment. He suddenly feels a sense of calm and guidance, but he can't help it, and he looks back up to see if the dwarf is there. And the dwarf is still there, but now is under the powerful gaze of an owl, strategically perched to view the situation. The wise owl casts an invisible guidance upon his craft, and he's able to successfully finish the piece.
The owl has been there and will probably return. The owl has looked things over. I am at peace. Though the busy world rattles on, I have rid myself of screeching traffic, dusty city streets, and personal cares. Early in the season, before mosquitoes have hatched, my sojourn is free even of those distractions, and briefly I can lose myself in what I fancy is the owl's world.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Owl of Minerva, who possesses cunning intelligence and strategic vision in both war and craftsmanship. And she inspires these qualities in the men, and it is mostly men, who she chooses to assist. She uses her mental acuity to complement the brute strength and heroism of Hercules and Odysseus. Mars, on the other hand, is such an impulsive savage that she finds him offensive and is forced to even submit him on more than one occasion. That's right. Minerva, Athena, has the power on certain occasions to submit the war god Mars, because his savage, unrestrained, low impulse control kind of warfare is not what she's about. So what's her background? We know that birth and childhood stories have been crucial to these Greek characters, and this is also the case with Athena. We know that Hera, Juno, had married the big guy Zeus in divine splendor, and they had a beautiful wedding, and she was given magical apples. But as is often the case, there was a previous marriage for Zeus. Long ago, Zeus had married a very wise goddess, and he thought to himself, I want to get some of that wisdom for myself. So one day, when she least expected it, Zeus scooped up his wife and gulped her down into his belly. Yes, he consumed his own spouse. And here's what I think is the best part of this. It actually worked for a while. He consumed his spouse and benefited greatly from the extra wisdom that permeated his insides. So time passed as Zeus enjoyed this new intelligence, this wisdom. But one day, the big guy, Jupiter, Zeus, came down with a giant headache, a big migraine, bigger than he had ever had. He summoned all the gods on Olympus and told them the situation, but nobody could help. Even Apollo, who was usually skilled in medicine, nobody had any answers. So it dragged out. Finally, he couldn't bear the pain any longer. He called his son and our good friend Vulcan, the blacksmith, who had many tools, including an axe, and Zeus commanded Vulcan to
cleave his head open with the axe, to chop into his head like a melon. Vulcan dutifully and energetically obeyed and split the head of Zeus wide open like a cantaloupe.
Minerva sprang out of her father's head, full grown, clad in glittering armor, with poised spear, and chanting a triumphant song of victory. The assembled gods recoiled in fear before this unexpected apparition, while at the same time a mighty commotion over land and sea proclaimed the advent of a great divinity. Wow. Cunning intelligence and strategy are her defining qualities. Cunning intelligence. Both on the battlefield, and that seems pretty obvious so far, but both on the battlefield and from behind the loom. A master of the art of sewing, she applied her foresight to guide the needle to productive and victorious ends. And in the same way she helped with the needle, she enjoyed assisting in other crafts, pottery, woodworking, etc. The needle and the spear, the needle and the spear. The character of Minerva, who emerged from the head of Jupiter fully clad in the bronze armor, would go on to be strongly influenced, or she would go on to manifest her motherless birth. The lack of the mother would affect her character development. Here's a quote. Not being the offspring of a mother, her bosom was as cold as the steel with which it was covered. By this disposition, equally adapted to quiet, unprejudiced musing on art and science, and to undaunted participation in warlike occupations, her twofold character, as goddess of wisdom and as heroine, is at once explained and justified.
Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, was the offspring of Jupiter without a mother. She sprang forth from his head completely armed. Her favorite bird was the owl.
Now, I was surprised to read there's actually an etymological connection between the name Minerva and words like mental or government. Minerva, mental, the mind. Ment is the mind. Minerva is the divinity of cunning intelligence. And to match her pure, clear-headed intelligence and commitment to manly virtues, she remained a virgin. By renouncing femininity and its fulfillment within marriage, the virgin rejoins the male camp, and by this inversion incarnates the warrior values with their maximum intensity. At her great ceremony, the sacred robe of Athena was suspended like a sail upon a ship, drawn through the principal parts of the city to her temple and placed before the statue of the goddess inside. So they would march it across for everyone to see and then lay it before the statue of Athena. Maidens of the noblest families of Athens embroidered the robe with scenes of the exploits of gods and heroes. An honorable person in ancient Greece was sometimes said to be worthy of Athena's robe. So you were a worthy, honorable person, you were worthy of the robe. This embroidered robe in the public procession is a perfect example of mythology as a thing that is done in concrete form, rather than something that is just merely believed or communicated with words. It really does fulfill the definition perfectly that I sketched out at the beginning, which is an imperfect definition which just says mythology is the big story that accumulates and exemplifies, and it should be expressed in concrete form in the life of the group. This meets all those criteria. Athena's temple would go on to have a long succession of other uses. It would be used as a church and a mosque, and people change, but the structure still speaks. Now you may say, oh no, we can just throw some sage and give it a nice cleaning and it'll be perfectly useful for Jesus and Muhammad, and that crazy Athena will not have any place in our worship. But I mean, the building was specifically designed for Athena. So it's almost like I can picture throughout these ages, as the Christians and the Muslims worshipped in this building, it's almost like looming in the background is this giant owl, maybe just faintly hooting and tooting, still from the background casting her shadow on everything. The energy that's put in and the intent, I do think still lingers to some degree. I don't know that you can completely get rid of that. Just like if you used a church for a coffee shop. Call me crazy, call me superstitious. I think there's something still there, something that lingers from the incredible output of energy and purpose that was used for that project, specifically for the physical building. Unsurprisingly, Minerva became the patroness of schools. In Rome, her statue was placed in every classroom, as it should be today, I might add. And right now on this podcast, I hereby propose that every school in the United States, in these United States, should be furnished with a vaulted ceiling in order to fit a giant statue of the Owl of Minerva. And on the other side of the classroom will be installed the image of a terrifying dwarf with an evil eye, upon whom Athena's gaze will be fixed. This will be the new environment in which your progeny will be educated. And each day, moment by moment, they must choose, the kids must choose. And I am going to take this to the school board. As they look at this giant Owl of Minerva and this sinister dwarf, moment by moment, they have to choose between the ugliness of the dwarf and the clear, steady guidance of Athena's owl. The ugliness of impulsive passions and mischief versus the cool-headed victory of long-term planning and steady execution.